This happened back when I was 14, but even with my bad memory, I remember this years later. I honestly think that this memory will haunt me for the rest of my life. I would often go walking either alone or with my neighbor, Jem, but this specific night she didn't go out with me. I usually went walking at around 9 at night, but was impatient that night, so I left about 15 minutes early. It was summer in Texas, but I grabbed my black hoodie anyways. The reason for this was because I was a pretty small kid, even for my age, and I would walk with a knife in my sleeve in case of a problem. There was security in this area, but they were pretty much useless and weren't fond of the kids anyways, so wearing black was to avoid them seeing me and to maybe help avoid being noticed by anyone else too. The area was heavily wooded and the roads had no streetlights. I had lived there my whole life though, so with the moonlight this wasn't really an issue. I could see things as much as I needed to. I walked to the park in the area and sat down on the swing set like I had a million times before. The park was old and wasn't very well taken care of, so the swing set creaked. The wooden picnic tables were half rotted with the paint mostly peeled away, and the metal slide was covered in rust. There was the main road that ran in front of the park and a branch-off road that ran along the side of the park with a thin line of trees between the side road and park. After a while, a favorite song of mine came on and I, of course, started singing to it, since singing was a big way I let out stress despite my stage fright. I had a tendency to not hold back when singing at this park since there was rarely people near it during the day, let alone at night. My blood ran cold though when I saw the shape of a person maybe 50 to 100 feet in front of me on the main road. The main reason for the chill was the fear that this random person heard me sing. But then I got a deeper bad feeling. Something was just wrong about them. I noticed that the person was walking fast, really fast, almost at running speed. I figured he might have been running from something or after something, but when I looked around everywhere that I could possibly see from where I was, I saw nothing else but them. They soon passed by the park, not seeming to notice me, and after a few minutes of waiting to make sure that they were gone, I continued singing. After a couple of more songs, I decided that it was time to go home, and I still had that bad feeling. That uneasy pit in my stomach that you get when you're being watched. I even thought that I saw something behind the tree line beside the side road and the swings, but I brushed that off as an animal or something. Deer were really common, so were dogs and things, so it was probably me getting spooked by an animal again. But the feeling was eating away at me, so I cut my usual 30-minute to an hour walk to about 10 minutes. So I got up and started to leave the park, turning onto the main road to go home. As I was leaving, I saw a person walking towards the main road from the road that I ran right along the park. It looked like the same person as before. It was clearly a man. He must have been visiting a friend or something, right? Even if that was the case, I crossed the opposite side of the street so I wouldn't pass directly by him. He didn't look particularly dangerous or unusual, so sadly no weird, creepy, homeless-looking man for this story. I just got a bad feeling from him, which is probably what makes him even more terrifying. He got to the intersection before me and stopped. I passed by and glanced at the man, taking in what details I could under the moonlight that came from between the tree branches. He looked normal. He was probably an average height, wearing a pure white ball cap with no logos that cast a shadow over his face, and a pure white polo-type shirt. There wasn't a speck of dirt on the man. He looked well kept, and it made the moonlight almost shine on him like he was some kind of ghost, which just added to my uneasy feeling. He clearly wasn't out there to be exercising or anything like that. He watched me as I passed by, and I tried to pretend that I didn't notice. I would occasionally look around as if though I was just looking at the woods so I could see the man out of my peripheral vision. I didn't want or need to see the man in detail, partly because I was scared of the possibility of seeing something else too. Just because the man was much larger than me didn't mean that he wasn't probably armed as well. Once I was around 15 feet past the intersection, I did one of these glances and my stomach dropped as I saw him turn and start to follow me. Maybe he was just going for an extra long walk or something, right? He probably isn't following me, right? Then another thought popped in my mind and it sent my stomach to my feet. I'd been there for probably 10 minutes or so singing after he passed. What if he wasn't visiting anyone? What if he was the thing I saw just beyond the tree line? That's kinda obvious now that that was almost definitely the case, but let's be fair. When do 14-year-olds ever think through all the details of a situation completely during the situation? He was probably watching me the whole time. He could have snuck up and done God knows what at any time. I kept doing my glances and noticed that he was getting closer and closer. I gripped my knife tighter, ready in case I had to use it. The chance of it going well wasn't the best, but it was a better chance than not trying at all. But I wanted that to be a last-ditch option. I tried to make sure it wasn't obvious that I was keeping tabs on him. I didn't want him getting anxious and having him decide to speed up whatever plan it was. I was only halfway home, and this was before I had surgery on my ankle, so I was absolutely sure that he could catch me before I'd reach the house if I started running where I was, so that wasn't an option whatsoever. I didn't have many current options though, so the one I chose was to bide my time till an opportunity opened up. I kept walking at a rather quick but unpanicked pace, keeping tabs on the man as he inched closer and kept an eye out for opportunities. And an opportunity came, and it felt like it was sent from God himself. I saw headlights. A car was rolling towards me at a careful pace, like normal considering the animals I mentioned earlier. It was Jem's dad. I recognized the shape of the lights, and as the car got closer, I became convinced it was him. I was never so relieved to see that tiny white car. I tried signaling him without letting the man know that I was, but he just passed by. He must have thought I was just saying hi. I glanced back again. Even though he didn't stop, he did exactly what I needed. He did slow down a bit as he passed. The man backed up a lot and crossed to the other side of the road. The headlights were on him, and he couldn't see me at least for around 5 or 6 seconds, maybe a bit longer, including readjusting to the dark. I walked faster. I didn't run, that way my steps wouldn't be too loud, but I rounded the corner before he'd be able to readjust and get sight of me again. Once I could turn and no longer see him, I rushed home and locked the door. I knew better than to leave it unlocked, since after all, I lived in the woods. Just because I couldn't see him anymore didn't mean that he wasn't nearby, and didn't mean he couldn't see me. As stupid as this next part is, it's probably for the best that I did it. I texted Jem. I asked her to meet me outside right now because something happened and I needed to come over. She said okay, and we both went outside, and as soon as I saw her in the driveway, I sprinted to her house. I didn't want to be outside any longer than I had to be. She kept panicking and asked what happened and what was wrong, and once I caught my breath, I told her everything. Right after I got done explaining, her dad walked in the house. He looked at Jem, seeming worried, then noticed me hiding behind her. He looked relieved and told her, "I was about to tell you to ask her to come over here." I asked him if he saw the man following me, and he said in the affirmative. He didn't really see his face, but that it was looking like he was trying to make it look like he was on a phone when he wasn't holding anything. But that wasn't even close to the worst part. I think this was the first time I've seen this man scared, and I'm not sure if I've ever seen fear like this from him since. He told us the man wasn't alone. There was a gate at the front of where I live that needed a car to get in. Apparently there was another man outside the gate who looked similar to the first, standing by a van. That meant they didn't live there, didn't want security knowing they were there, and wanted to get out quickly and quietly after they did whatever they were there for. Needless to say, I spent that night at Jem's that night, and I have no clue what would have happened had Jem's dad not driven by, or if I would have left at my normal time. I was 17 in the 11th grade. I usually didn't accept random requests on my Instagram, especially if we had no mutuals. I took my page off private for a while, and so anyone could follow me. This is when I got a notification that he started following me. The page had a normal following, not small enough to question whether it was a fake account or not. He had multiple pictures of himself with friends and family with captions and all. His comments were off for all of his posts, which wasn't a red flag since I had mine off too. Immediately after following me, he went through my profile and liked all of my pictures. He was a fit, good-looking guy, so I was flattered. Not long after, He DM'd me replying to a story of mine asking me if I was from such and such a city and that he was from there too. We immediately hit it off and DM'd nonstop for a while. It didn't feel forced and we never ran out of things to talk about. We eventually swapped phone numbers and started texting. He told me he was studying at a really good university which was in a city 2 hours away from where we both lived. Our talks escalated to day-to-day phone calls which lasted for hours. I sincerely started growing feelings for him and he made it clear he felt the same for me. We would talk about our deepest insecurities, our past, what we wanted our futures to look like, etc. It had been about 2 months of talking and I was undeniably eager to meet up in person. He would tell me he was coming to visit home on the weekend, but would always come up with an excuse as to why he couldn't make it. He gave very convincing and detailed excuses, never vague so I didn't question it. I hadn't told any friends about him until my best friend and I had a sleepover. I ended up telling her about him, showed her his pictures, and didn't leave out that we hadn't met yet. Wanting to look out for me, she suggested I ask him to video chat to make sure he is who he says he is before meeting up. She told me she didn't want to freak me out, but that she was sure that she had seen his pictures on Tumblr before. There's a tool on Google that can be used to locate social media accounts and articles where the pictures have been posted. While she was at that, I called him and asked him if he was home and alone before asking him to video chat so he couldn't make up an excuse on the spot. He said he was home and alone but couldn't video chat because of his weak internet connection. My heart sank into my stomach. The possibility of being catfished was not far-fetched anymore. I quickly downloaded WhatsApp because I remember him telling me he spoke to his parents on it. Before doing that, my friend showed me the results of what she found, which devastated me to my core. The man in the pictures was a French model and singer. We found the exact pictures of that POS used on his catfish profile and an actual verified Instagram account. My devastation turned into anger, then turned into absolute disgust and revulsion when I saw his profile picture on WhatsApp. He was evidently much older than he claimed he was, probably in his 30s, a complete different race than what he portrayed to be, lied about being a university student, etc. P.S. I have no preference to what comes to race or nationality, but he literally lied to me in detail about being part Italian and part Colombian. Even made up an excuse as to why he didn't speak Italian or Spanish when he claimed he frequently visited back home. I wanted to crawl into a hole and die. I started to sob uncontrollably and confronted him on WhatsApp. He went on to explain how he came across my profile and wanted desperately to get to know me. He said I knew I wouldn't be interested in who he actually is and wouldn't be attracted to him, so instead he used his fake account, which he was already using and active on prior to come across my profile. He said he came close to coming clean multiple times, but was afraid of how I would react. He said even though his persona was fake, everything else was genuine. It turned out that he was a 31-year-old mechanic and living with his parents. He even confessed to driving to my neighborhood, finding my high school and following me around as I went about my day. I blocked him off WhatsApp, then he quickly started texting my number, begging me not to block that too and to give him a chance to explain things face to face. I went on to block him on everything, feeling absolutely heartbroken and betrayed while doing so. I spent months of my life daydreaming and fantasizing about how it would be like when we finally met in person and where it would go from there. Grew genuine feelings for him and even considered applying for the same university he was supposedly studying at. I got over it eventually, but I've definitely grown to be very paranoid and distrusting when it comes to meeting people online. I'm happily married now, but I wonder what would have happened if he and I met in person, and the consequences I would have faced for being so naive and oblivious. Back when I was still a senior in high school, me and my mom went on a trip to the movies. It was this regular mother-daughter bonding ritual we used to have. Catch a movie, critique it, and then hit up the Bob Evans next door for dinner. We'd always pick up my dad something in a takeout box too, and I really miss those days. But anyway, we have our food and drive home, just like we always did, and the rest of the night was uneventful. But the next morning, I wake up to a Facebook friend request from a name I didn't recognize. Thinking it might have been a mutual, I just accept it, but then like 5 minutes later, I get a message from the same account that says something like, "Hey, I know this might sound a little weird, but I saw you at the Bob Evans last night and I wondered if you might like to go out sometime." So I'm like, how did someone figure out my name? Did they overhear my mom say it or something? Like, I get he was polite, but it still creeped me out. Why would you go to those lengths to find me? And he must have been looking for hours. Immediately, there's all these red flags, so I had no intention of accepting his invitation, but at the same time, I didn't want to be a jerk to him. So I messaged him back like, "Hi, yeah, I was there, but I'm actually kind of seeing someone right now, and I don't think they'd be too happy if we went out." At first, their reply was encouraging, and they seemed to take it on the chin. They say like, "That sucks. Sorry if this is awkward now." I respond, "No, don't worry. You didn't know. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, though." It was a close-ended reply, the kind that's designed to just end the conversation. Next thing, he starts typing, and I figured he's going to just carry on being gentlemanly, creepily direct, but gentlemanly, I suppose. But no. There's this very subtle shift in his tone when he says, "I just figured, since I went to all this effort to find you, you might give me a chance." This is where I saw a kind of, opportunity. I had literally zero clue how this guy had found me, and I didn't like the idea that just anyone could look me up online no matter how innocent their intentions were. So I straight up asked him, "How did you find me?" He starts typing, then stopping, typing, then stopping, and I can tell he's thinking of the right way to phrase it. Then he says something like, "Where there's a will, there's a way. I can find anyone online. It's easy. When I set my mind to something, I achieve it. Is your current boyfriend an overachiever like that?" I distinctly remember him using that term, overachiever, and was honestly so cringe. If I wasn't put off before, I certainly was then. But still, I wanted to find out how this creep had managed to track me down, so I might have done something stupid to get him to talk and said, "Honestly, no, and it's kind of hot that you're so smart and stuff. So, how did you do it?" He responds, "I was the one who swiped your mom's card," he replied. So, a liar too. He wasn't some hacker. He just worked at the Bob Evans. So yeah, he probably had overheard my name, then just matched it up with the name on my mom's card. Then bingo, he finds me on Facebook. I had to hold back from just letting loose on this guy, but if he was that much of a psycho, then I figured it was better to not make him mad. "Ah, sneaky. I like it," I replied. "But like I said, kinda seeing someone right now, so thanks, but no thanks. Bye." I mute the conversation, but don't block the guy or unfriend him or anything. See, making him mad I was worried about. Then I just go about the rest of my day. Yeah, I told all my friends how creepy it was, and I casually suggested to my mom we pick a new food venue for our post-movie dinners, but other than that, I just went about my day as usual. It's kind of weird how this pattern repeated itself. The first time I'm asleep, blissfully ignorant that some creep is plugging my name into Facebook, probably to perv at my display picture. The second time I had him on mute, so I had no idea what was going on in that little message thread. It wasn't until later on that night that I opened my messenger on my phone and actually saw the little 44 notification count next to his name that I realized he'd sent me other messages. And yes, it did say 44. He'd sent 44 different messages, mostly rants, and he'd been sending them on and off all day. But it wasn't until I actually read what they said that I started to freak out. I'm not going to type up everything I remember him saying, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you will be able to guess the majority of it. Think nice guy style put-downs coupled with threats of actual violence. He basically said that if he'd managed to track me down online in a few hours, imagine what he could learn by the end of the week. He said he had friends that would help him break into our house. After that, they'd tie my parents up, kill them in front of me, then take turns abusing me until I was used up and lifeless. And that's the clean version of it, condensed into 2 sentences. 44 different lengthy messages he sent me. Think about that. The final message I read, it went on, before I ran downstairs to tell my mom and dad, was the message that read, "I'm in my car, and I'm looking for your house." I didn't know he was just trying to scare me, so I was crying as Dad called the cops. The guy ended up getting arrested for the threats he made, and I know he got fired from the Bob Evans because my mom kicked up a stink about it after the arrest. I never saw the guy again, so I'm thinking it was a case of his bark being louder than his bite. But I know that there are other women out there who aren't so lucky, and their stalkers are much more willing to get up close and personal. I just hope we can one day live in a world where men don't act all predatory and creepy with women they like. Like, it's so counterintuitive to what we want in a man. I wish they just understand that. But till then, I suppose all we can do is be safer online and with dating apps, and hope we never run into that one sick psychopath that won't take no for an answer.
Our official merch store is finally here. If you want to support more of our channel, check out our merch shop. The link is in the description down below. See you on the next video.